Well, hello and welcome to Knife Delights. You know, folks, sometimes you pick up a knife like this one. I got in an antique store here recently, and it's kind of, well, in a way mundane. It's kind of an interesting looking knife, and so you purchase it because you know it's a rope knife or perhaps a sailor's knife. And then you find out, well, actually what you have is something a little bit more special than just a regular jackknife. And that's what I want to talk about here today, because what we have here is what is commonly referred to as a Q5 Coast Guard knife. And this knife pattern was, well, it came out in the World War II time era. Now, I don't believe this one was an actual issued knife of any sort, but we're going to get into the little bit of the history, because this is a Camillus, and it ties into this knife here, another Camillus that I personally carried when I was in the Navy. So I went to Levine's Guide, and I wanted to get a good definition, because I'd always called this, well, in the Navy we referred to this as a bosun's knife, and it appears this one can be called a bosun's knife also. And it gets a little complicated because this one has the Camillus tang stamp on it, the 4-line tang stamp, which means it was probably made between the early 30s and the mid 40s. But the Q5 pattern, or the Q5 Coast Guard approved knife, had a separate tang stamp on the pile side, and this one doesn't have that. So I don't know if this is pre-World War II, and this was made prior to the Maritime Commission approving this pattern for the Coast Guard, or if it was post-war and made for the civilian market. But let's start with some basics here real quick. According to Levine, the ordinary sailor's knife is a curved jack or curved regular jack with a single sheep's foot or flaring rope blade. These special straight-edged blades are used to cut rope cleanly. This is done by laying the rope on a wooden surface and hammering the blade through it with a belaying pin. Between this rough use and the hazards of salt water, it is not surprising that old sailors' knives in good condition are rare. Ordinary sailors' knives are fairly large, at least 4 inches long closed. They usually have a bail so that they can be secured from falling overboard. Smaller curved jacks with a stout sheep's foot blade are called New England whalers. I suspect they got their name from being a handy size for working with light harpoon line. Whalers may be drilled for a lanyard, but they have no bail. So, that is your basic definition. Now, you remember I said I learned of this in the Navy, and it was called a bosun's knife. Well, when we look in Levine's Guide here, we can see here they got the same basic pattern there, and it's stamped or printed bosun's mate, and bosun's mate on the single and or the one with the marlin spike. So a bosun's mate in the Navy is a deckhand. They're the ones that are out taking care of the exterior of the ship. And they also usually get trained in small boats, and they're become the coxswains on the small boat. Think of Normandy and D-Day and all the small craft going ashore. A lot of times it was a bosun's mate that was driving those boats. So we continue on with Levine's Guide. It says, since the late 19th century, some sailors' knives have been made with an auxiliary folding marlin spike. The spike is used in splicing and in fancy knot work. So that's what we have here, is the one with the marlin spike, and it does lock into place, and you use this here to unlock the blade. Now, Levine does actually show a picture of this knife in his book, and I'll pull it up here. You can see Camillus Cutlery Company, AP approved, U.S. Coast Guard, 1944 Q5 lifeboat knife, wood handles, $50. So, Supposedly, the Coast Guard approved this knife for use in lifeboats. And just because it says it's Coast Guard approved does not necessarily mean it was issued to Coast Guard personnel, but it was just a piece of equipment that the Coast Guard did approve for use by various maritime services. Now, I am going to put up a series of slides here because I do have access to some old Camillus files and catalogs. So the first one here is a picture that I was able to find on old Camillus military knives. And as you can see, pictured here is the California Quartermaster Sailor's Jackknife. So already you can see these knives get called many different names. So the question, even online, was what does the Q5 mean? You know, what does the Q mean in the Coast Guard knife? Well, Q is probably something for quartermaster. So as you can see, the government number, they did not assign a number, but our number, meaning Camillus's number, is 425L39. So I believe that's the pattern of knife that we have here. And you can read the description there. One blade, jackknife, no shield, black tang, blank inside, round haft. Number 1, heavy clevis, blade chrome plated. And references the Maritime Commission Sailor's Knife. Then we go on and it says uses, general utility aboard ship, emergency in event of sinking. So that was some of the uses for it. And obviously it looks like they put some of these in like life rafts. Although there is a life raft knife, which is basically what we would call a fish knife. And they put those in the life raft too. So again, several different names for these things. And here's another page that actually gives a little better drawing for this knife. And you can see up there, Sailor's Jackknife is what Camillus called it, or what the Maritime Service called it. And this is from 10/27/1943. And you can read the description there. And again, the Camillus model number is 425L21. And lastly, I got a picture here of the page out of the 1946 Camillus catalog. And you can see on the left-hand side, it's got a list showing of all of their folding pocket knives that were military related. And as I've highlighted here in the picture, you can see this rope knife here. And again, it's Maritime Commission and Merchant Marines Sailor's Knife is what Camillus called it. And on the left-hand side, down at the very bottom, you can see the one with the marlin spike, which is the second one that I have here showing. Now, if I haven't already said so, and I don't think I did, but I want to thank Tobias, because he's the first one that pointed this out when I was going over my latest antique store knives that I'd bought. He's the one that pointed this out and said, what, that might be a Q5 Coast Guard knife. And I'm like, wow, okay. That's what makes this so exciting. But let's just look at this knife. We can see we got a half stop here. Of course, the big sheep's foot blade or lamb's foot blade. They call it a sheep's foot. I kind of thought it was a lamb's foot, but tomato, right? Single blade knife. Still excellent snap to this. Initially, I thought this was a bone handle, but that's actually jigged wood, which I'm just not familiar with a jigged wood. But I can tell from the pictures that I have seen, the pins are in the same spots as in the design. So, got that nice bolster on there. And it looks to be all steel. There's no brass on this. And of course, on this one here, you can see with the blade, it's got used an awful lot. The blade's actually a little bit proud. There is no half stop on it. I do need to work on that kick just a little bit and bring that down just a little bit. And then these are probably Jig Delrin. Yeah. Now, when you look at these blades shapes, they're both supposedly lamb's foot, but you can see this one's more straight up and down, and this one's got a little bit more of a curve to it. And the blade was wider on this one than on this one. So, much big, wider blade. But this is a fantastic knife, and again, for the age of it, I did not put any oil or done any cleaning on it whatsoever. But just a fantastic knife in fantastic shape. I am so excited to get it. Another piece of wonderful cutlery history. Well, folks, until next time, go out and have a very delightful day. I hope you've enjoyed this video.